Boeing right now has a market cap of $72 billion. I was on a phone call with an investor yesterday who thinks that this company may have negative value. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not apparent to me right now. I mean, ultimately, if you do a valuation by parts in the company, you can convince yourself pretty easily that between the defense business and their services portfolio, which has a big defense component to it, if you were to assign zero value to the Boeing commercial aircraft, you'd get to something around $100, depending on what multiples you use. Call it $80 to $120 of value, right? So having negative value for all of Boeing doesn't seem to make sense to me now.
Right now, looking at how this company is trading and how the airlines are trading, what do you believe the expectation is among investors of what kind of policy response we're going to be seeing? Because if you believe a bailout is not coming, it is hard to believe that the stock should be at these prices, and it's unclear if you do get a bailout, what kind of strings are going to be attached.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things that people have looked at is the liquidity of Boeing, right? So if you look at Boeing's liquidity today and you go across their balance sheet, they've got about $23 billion liquidity, and that includes some things encumbering it, like the Embraer deal and their dividend. If you say, hey, they don't do the Embraer deal, and that gets you $32 billion of liquidity. And then their defense business, people forget, generates $3 to $4 billion on top of that, right? So when you look at how much cash flow Boeing has potentially on hand, if they pull some levers, it's upwards of 35, 36 billion.
If you were going to spend all 35 billion, how quickly? What's their run rate?
Well, I mean, Boeing has been burning through ballpark about $1 billion and $1.5 billion per month. Back to a question that was brought up before. If you look at the 400 737s that are parked, and if you were to assume that all those airplanes canceled and Boeing had to reimburse all those airlines their pre-delivery payments, that's only, but it's $7 billion, right? They could afford to do that, right? So if you look at, what Boeing has on their balance sheet for a rainy day, it's actually pretty significant.
Hey, Ron, this is Phil LeBeau. When you look at the backlog that Boeing has right now, not just for the MAX, but for all commercial aircraft orders, how much of that do you believe is genuinely threatened, so to speak, by what we're seeing with coronavirus and how it's hitting the airlines around the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Phil, right? So when you think about it, you have to think about where the airlines are positioned in the backlog, right? And as you know, the stuff that's much closer for delivery, there's huge pre-delivery payments that have been made, and that stuff is probably reasonably safe. But when you walk out just a little bit, airplanes can be deferred. When you look at the situation globally, I think airlines fall in kind of two groups. One that's going to be airlines that want to renegotiate things, and airlines that want to cancel things. So on a short-term basis, and we're looking at, say, Boeing's backlog over the next 2 years, could a third of it, 25% of it, be at risk? Right. Yeah.
Hey, Ron, yeah. We got to run in 1 second, but real quick, do you believe that there's private money that would support a bridge loan, if you will, to the likes of a Boeing, to the likes of the airline industry? And this goes to the issue of whether it needs to be government money or not, whether there is a private market out there that would jump in with rates that make sense. That's the other part of this.
Yeah, I do ultimately, right? Because particularly for Boeing, because it's a long-term growth market. I mean, you have to believe that after this passes, the world will continue to travel. It's the duration of how long this lasts is a question. But when it does pass, the world will travel.
Right? I don't disagree with you. I'm asking, do you believe there's private market money today? Do you believe there's anybody out there today that would lend money to a Boeing or to the airlines on any kind of, when I say reasonable interest, some kind of reasonable interest
Andrew,
rates,
that's the question,
bankrupting
though.
the company.
Reasonable rate, is it?
Right.
Yeah,
I
think, Andrew, Becky, you got to think about it this way, right? I mean, the airline industry and Boeing, they're really two different ventures. On the Boeing side, I can say, yeah, I think there would be. The airlines is a broader question, right? Because those business models, as you know, tend to be much more volatile, right? I mean, the airlines are already, talking about globally laying off and downing all these, taking flights out, that sort of thing. Where the Boeing isn't talking about laying off anybody right now. And remember, their talks with the government are around the entire industry, not just themselves, right? So they're looking out for the whole field, where airlines are, because of the volatility in the business model, much more concerned in the short term. So yeah, I do believe on the Boeing side there would be private money at a reasonable rate. On the airlines, it's a different question.